Hello, everybody. We are here with a lovely guest this week. And if you hear lawn equipment outside, that is what's happening outside. Oh, you know what? It might be my robot vacuum. So you all might be hearing my robot vacuum. Enjoy that. His name is Rocky. But let me introduce our guest. So we have Dr. Jenn Kennedy today. So Dr. Jenn Kennedy is a clinical sexologist and licensed marriage and family therapist based in Santa Barbara. She sees individuals and couples struggling with low sexual desire or dissatisfaction. Dr. Jenn has been quoted in Redbook, Reader's Digest, Forbes Health, Daily Ohm, Shondaland, Parade, Allure, and Yahoo Life. Dr. Jenn is a speaker, podcaster, and trainer for therapists, physicians, and business leaders. She runs small group intensives with a curriculum designed to empower intimacy exploration. She also hosts her own podcast called Pleasure Project, Sex and Relationships. So welcome, Dr. Jenn. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you.
Good to see you. So for everybody listening, we're going to cover a much needed, much high demanded topic on low desire, and specifically myths around low desire for women. And I think there's a lot of them, and I'll be curious what you found in practice. It's kind of fun for me to talk to another sex therapist and just kind of compare notes a little bit. So I'm excited to do that as well. And then definitely stay tuned for the end, because Dr. Jenn has an exciting experience coming up to support you with intimacy that we will share with you guys. But let's just start with, how did you get into this work? Because we have pretty unique jobs. So how did you wind up here?
Right? It's like, how do we actually get to do this every day, where people
it's pretty cool
about their difficulties. So I did a couple other things first. I was in public relations for a couple of years, and then I went back and did a degree in photography.
How interesting.
I know. I worked as like a writer and photographer for about 12 years.
Cool.
And then the recession just made it so hard. It's such a grind being a creative. And I went back and did my master's in clinical psych when I was 40, which was a big, but it was something I had always thought about, but I went into that knowing I wanted to see couples.
Okay.
Because I'd done therapy with everybody I'd ever dated. And I dated a lot.
Foreshadowing of your career. I love it.
And I just thought, this is so interesting. Like, I'd had some really good therapists, and I just was like, I think this process is so interesting. And so I went in knowing I really wanted to do that couples track. So I did the MFT route.
Okay.
And then as I got more experience in the couples, as I started seeing couples in my training, I was like, nobody talks about sex.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to talk about sex. And we get so little training. So then I went in and did.
I had none in my master's, zero. And just for people listening, do not assume that like your average therapist has training in this.
No, we get one class. I mean, I don't know about you. Are you an MFT?
I'm a counselor, and I literally had zero. So not until I,
specifically
sought it out.
We were a marriage and family therapist, which is a dumb name anyway, because it's not always marriage and it's not always family. But
fair.
We, as that degree, get one class in that. And I taught that class for 5 years at the master's level after I finished. And it's called Human Sexuality. And it's a good introduction, but it's not sufficient because it's so complicated. And so a lot of clinicians are really not prepared to really do a deeper dive because it's complex. They feel intimidated. They don't know how to really, it's not just the mechanics, right? It's not just anatomy. It's much more like nuanced than that. The negotiation of sexuality, the complications of desire, of two people trying to figure out, their own hearts and their own hearts, and like the coming together of like expressing needs, right? It touches on all these. It's a microcosm really of the relationship. And so
it is.
Sexuality is complicated. And so that was just really interesting to me. And it was a niche that there was no competition.
That's kind of what made me invest in it.
Because it's so touchy.
Yeah. Because the training is, did you do the ASEC certification or you did a different program?
I did an ASEC program. I didn't go through the ASEC training.
Got it.
I chose not to do that because I'm also, honestly, I'm a certified sex addiction therapist, and ASEC is very dismissive of my CSAT. So I chose to sort of.
They are. There's so much. I'm like, why do we have to be like haters towards each other? Can we all just get along?
So I'm with an ASEC program, but I'm also a CSAT. So I kind of wear both hats.
I like that.
So it's complicated, but yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things that I did, so if you do the ASAC training, you probably went through a SAR, the sexual attitude reassessment, or
Yeah.
So that, I think that's a key important difference between like a couples counselor and a sex therapist. And a lot of people get kind of confused with that. So even though this isn't our official topic, I do want to just take a moment to educate people. There are some couples counselors out there through their own work, through their upbringing, through whatever, who are just like really comfortable and like really well informed about sex.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely not saying they don't exist, but just it's not part of the training for them to kind of look at their own sexual attitude. So like we kind of had to be like exposed to, I was exposed to some like wild stuff. Like one of the things, it was like people who fell in love with objects. You know, it was like someone who I think was an Olympic archer and was in like a romantic relationship with her bow and arrow. And you're just like, it does make you giggle a little bit, but you're like, okay. And then, but they had a whole documentary about it. And someone had like sexual attraction towards like a church organ.
Yeah.
Like a piano type of organ in a church. So you're just like, oh, okay. And so the idea is like, okay, how can you show up and like check yourself and kind of be like, people are going to present with all sorts of kinks and fetishes and different lifestyle choices and compulsive or addictive behaviors. And can you put your own stuff aside?
Like we as sexual creatures, you know, oftentimes it's the fixation. It's also what you're feeding into your brain. And we see this with porn a lot, right? What goes in is also what perpetuates. And so the fixation sometimes is about what you can't have, or it's what was presented, or it's what was made to be off limits. Or unfortunately, sometimes it's what was, you know, what was taboo because it was, you know, abuse or that type of thing. But, you know, comes in through lots of different avenues. And so much about sexuality is about shame. And so when people come in with dysfunction or dissatisfaction, we have to unravel it and go, what is operating here? And why can't you get what you want? And what do you want? And so let's unpack it and understand, and just neutralize the environment so that they're not so twisted and tied up about what do they want.
Right. Yeah. So it's much more about like what is authentic for you, what actually feels good and healthy for you. And it might be very different than what feels good and healthy for someone else, you know? Okay. So then let's segue into women. And so what are some of the stories of how are women, quote unquote, with sex? How are we socialized with sex? Why do people assume women have lower desire?
Yeah, it's interesting. Women get painted as low desire, but I think that we can't look at that, you know, we can't just point at that because we have to look at it in a larger context.
Yeah.
Because we can't ignore the patriarchy because
we really cannot with this question. No,
it's, you know, most of the couples I see are heterosexual. And the men are coming in wanting sex, and it seems like the women are the gatekeepers of the sex. But I will also say it's not that women don't want sex. A lot of times I think it's they don't want the sex that they're having.
That's very true. Yeah.
So if they got better quality sex, if they were attended to differently, if their needs were more met in the sexual exchange, I think they'd be into it. Because when I get a group of women together, and, you know, the group work that I do, we have these conversations. The conversation is very different than what I hear in the couples work. Because the woman is actually sometimes not wanting to initiate any kind of touch because she doesn't want to then have to follow through with penetrative sex.
Right.
It's not very satisfying for her.
I hear that a lot too.
Yeah. Right. But if she knew that the quality of touch was going to be really rewarding, if she knew that she was going to get maybe some clitoral satisfaction, you know, she was going to get some attention, if there was going to be some decent warm up. Wow.
Right. And if there was not the pressure, right? Because sometimes she might be like, well, I'd love to like cuddle and make out. That sounds great, you know? Yeah. But it's like, oh, but he's going to want more, you know,
right.
Then I'm going to have to like feel defensive and guarded.
The orgasm, right? If the goal is so focused on, because men get very focused, they're very goal oriented, and they're very focused on orgasm, and women not so much, right? For them, it's the journey. It's not so much destination orgasm. And we see this when we look at studies between same-sex attracted couples, you know, women, that their satisfaction is much higher, and actually their orgasm rate is higher, but even just because they define sex so much more broadly. So
Yes.
they're happy to cuddle and kiss and make out and grind and whatever, but they're not, their lovemaking sessions are longer and
Mm-hmm.
slower and much more full body.
Yeah.
And that leads to more satisfaction for women.
Right.
So, yeah, you can't just say women don't like sex. I mean, yes, there's menopause and yes, there's busy being a mom and all that stuff. But I think you can't, you can't just look at it in a microcosm. You have to look at it in the larger context of what's happening in the sexual exchange between her and partner.
Yeah. Do you see a big difference in desire and libido based on gender or biological sex?
I think it's just easier for men to access sex. I
Mm.
mean, they just, and I think, again, I think it's a cultural overlay.
Yeah.
I think it's simpler. I mean, first of all, men wear their genitals outside.
They're
It's
just
there.
right there.
It's just so easy. It's like the wind blew. It's just, it's so much easier for men. And I've seen every variation, right? There's men that have difficulty with um, sometimes arousal, and eventually there's erectile dysfunction. But
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, men have a much easier time accessing arousal. Arousal being the physiological response, and that seems to be permissible. And again, I think that's cultural. It's also probably just the physical build of the body.
Yeah.
They can just get there so much quicker. Their desire and their arousal are like one and the same. They just they have a thought and their body responds. It's like, boop.
Yeah. That makes sense because I know with I guess we're going to have to break this term down too, sexual non-concordance,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a higher correlation for men between the psychological and the physical than there is
Yeah.
for women. So
Yeah, there's this delay oftentimes for women that's
mm-hmm.
confusing. For men, it's confusing for their male partners, I think, because men are like, they have a thought, they have a reaction. Whereas women are like, that's why we build in even the wanting model, right? Like the desire first, the willingness model, right?
Mm-hmm.
The willingness preceding, possibly the thought preceding
Right.
the arousal, because that's and men are like, wait, what? You have to think about it before you get there? That's so confusing to them to go.
It's interesting. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that when you first said women are the gatekeepers, my initial thought was, well, I was certainly socialized to be the gatekeeper of sex. I certainly felt men are just after one thing, and I'm like, oh yes, and I can't be slut shamed. That's bad. I need to have a good reputation.
Well, women
and,
are also the ones that end up carrying the child if they get pregnant.
Right.
So on a practical level,
right,
evolutionary level, women carry the responsibility if they get pregnant.
Right.
And especially now, if you can't get access to birth control, if you can't get access to abortion,
mm-hmm.
yeah, if you get pregnant, you carry the responsibility. So I think from that standpoint too, women guard. They don't want, not only do they not enjoy the pleasure, but they don't want the pregnancy, and that is a real risk. And so, they don't want that. And, so I think there's some of that also taking place, but it happens even when you're past pregnancy age. It's just I don't want that. And I don't want that isn't, I think, a global term. It's that I don't want the way that is happening. Because I found this too, with couples that haven't had sex in a long time, when I introduce Sensate and I say, sex is off the table, guys, penetrative sex. Let me just.
So let's tell, what is Sensate focus? Let's break that down for people.
Okay, so Sensate focus is old school, right? It's Masters and Johnson. It's an intervention. It's a 4-phase protocol that I love to use with couples that have just not been having sex. And phase 1 is just really sweet and simple. It's fully clothed. Oftentimes, one partner maybe will be wearing a yoga clothes kind of thing, where there's some sensation, there's some access, but not naked. And the touching happens one at a time. Partner A is touching partner B, and there's no genital touching. So you can touch anywhere that isn't genitals.
Okay.
And the idea being that you're looking to discover areas that are erogenous zones outside of the genitals, right? So it starts to help you discover there's such a tendency to go straight to the breasts or straight to the genitals, and it's like, do something
Yeah.
else, right? Like there's such tenderness in the neck or in the
Mm-hmm.
thighs, or there's all kinds of, like, the inner arm, like there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of places. The scalp is incredibly, I don't know if you've ever had a great scalp massage, but there's
Yeah,
lots of,
that like that head tingler thing. If anyone's ever done that, it looks like sort of a
right?
claw for your head. It's like a head orgasm.
I want
It's
them to
like
make out
crazy.
with the massage guy at the mall, like when he's doing it, right? I'm like, I open my eyes and I'm like, whoa, I'm about to start.
Like that felt very intimate.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Which is incredible. So it's helping the couple sort of get back to, like, basics of just touch, and there's no talking, there's no direction giving.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, there's some eye contact if they can tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helping them start on a very basic level to build some intimacy. And it can be quite intimate to not be joking, to not be distracted, and to just
Yeah.
be looking at one another while you're touching each other. And
Mm-hmm.
so I find that couples can feel kind of awkward doing it initially, but they actually really like it, and it's a way back in. And so as they're starting to skill build, and there's different levels, I have them do it a few times before we go on to the next level, and we
Okay.
process how it felt to be the receiver and how it felt to be the giver.
Okay.
Because
And do you feel like
typically,
this helps women who are having low desire?
yeah, because
Okay.
if they know that sex is off the table, if they know
Mm-hmm.
this is going to lead to sex, they're actually usually pretty willing, because they want some touch, and typically
Yes.
the partner desperately wants touch, and so it gets
Yes.
the touch needs start to be met, but it doesn't then cascade into sex. It starts to take some of that pressure off, and it starts to reconnect them, because oftentimes women want closeness in order to feel like they can get back to sex, and men want sex
Yes.
in order to feel like they can get to closeness.
Kind of true. Yeah.
And it's like you can
Although
enter
I
that.
have a lot of men, I think I see a lot of emotionally sensitive men. So they're like I need an emotional connection. She doesn't get that. I was like, yeah, you never know. The
Yeah,
role,
I mean,
yeah, the gender roles can always reverse, but yeah.
yeah.
That's that. I think what you just said about pressure though is so important. It's such a huge obstacle when it comes to sex, and especially if you are a couple that has gotten into like a sexless marriage type of situation, or where it's just very awkward trying to initiate. And I've definitely seen people where it's kind of become the elephant in the room, where it's like we're not talking about it, but it's there. We're just kind of
Yeah.
ignoring it. I do think that it's nice to kind of have like a step-by-step approach to kind of get back into it gradually. Because even though I think awkwardness is part of intimacy, people tend to avoid it pretty hardcore.
They just psych themselves out, and they get so
Mm-hmm.
everything feels so loaded that if anything
Yes.
goes wrong, they're just like eject. They just can't tolerate it, and so
Yes.
it's just too much pressure. So if they are, I like this because it gives a bit of structure, and
Yeah.
there's a timer. It's like 10 minutes, and then they just know that's containment.
Yeah. I like
So
that. Okay, so then what happens on the next level? So then they're like, okay, check. We're getting a little comfortable with touch. We're discovering some different zones, so it's not all genital focused.
yeah, and then eventually they have a little bit of clothes come off,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually there's like a handwriting meaning like hand over hand. So there's a little bit of direction giving, eventually. So it kind of progresses that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I just want people listening to know that like you are not stuck, right? If you're whatever is going on with your journey, sometimes you maybe just don't know where to start. And I think that's where working with a sex therapist / intimacy coach can be really helpful, because
Yeah.
we can assess properly. We can offer tools and ideas and suggestions that maybe you guys haven't thought of, right? And it's not the same
Well, it also
as
takes the pressure off you trying to guide the whole ship as
yeah.
partner, and instead
Yeah.
the normalizing comes in from the therapist saying, hey, we're neutralizing the environment, saying, hey, how did this feel, kind of slowing it down, helping you unpack, because there's all these like micro decisions that happen when you're trying to have intimacy, and sometimes you're just like, I can't handle it, and you shut down and you just back away, or you muscle through it and kind of dissociate. And that's hard too.
That's true. And especially with sex, if you want to have any pleasure, dissociating is not helpful.
Nope.
Dissociating is where your brain and your body are very separate, and you've kind of like left your body a little bit, or kind of in a little trance state, or often a daydream or whatever. And so anything that, kind of brings you back to your senses can kind of help you be in your body and actually enjoy yourself, which is the goal, right? Okay, so back to kind of like myths with women and desire. So we know that women don't always have low desire, and sometimes it's not even that the desire is broken in any way. It's what they're doing and the type of touch. What else do you find with women and desire that's maybe a little misunderstood?
I would say that women don't have fantasies, or women don't have interest in asserting
Okay.
or initiating.
Yeah.
Because I know they do.
Yeah.
I know they do. I know that because I have girlfriends that talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also know it from my group, because that's one of the things we talk about. And when they're unencumbered by, the self-consciousness of partner, they're prompted by peers, and they're sort of like, and I've got some clients that read erotica, or they're not, I don't really have
a
any
lot. Yeah.
to watch porn, but they do read erotica when they've got some permission and some examples, I guess. They're like, and their mind gets to kind of have a playground to cultivate those types of ideas. I think they really do take off, because we all have kind of the masculine and the feminine sides. And I think there is a lot of power in all of us. And so the idea of wanting and the idea of taking charge at times is really enticing to most women.
I think you're right about that. And you're right. It's not really framed that way. It's kind of like the man, if it is a male female partnership, or whoever seems more masculine in the relationship, will take charge and take the lead. And yeah, that's not always the case. I think you're right.
That phrase too with women, butch in the streets, femme in the sheets.
I don't know if I heard that one, but that's funny. Well, right. And so I think there's a lot of, even masculine men who are kind of like, I would really love it if she would take charge, So I think that like giving ourselves
and
freedom.
It feels good sometimes to relinquish control.
For sure. I think everyone feels that way sometimes. Well, I also think that's why you don't really see a lot of professional submissives, but you do see professional doms, right? Because I think everyone likes being a little submissive. I think we all have like decision-making fatigue. We're all just like tapped out from like administrative tasks and executive functioning, that we're just like, can someone else just do the stuff?
Yeah. And if it's done well, and we know that person is actually really capable, boy, that feels good.
Yes.
Right? Charge. Do it.
Yeah. And I think if you view it as like, maybe this is sort of a gift to my partner, that could be motivating. And I think everyone can find their own different style of dominating and what that looks like authentically for them. But yeah, that's a good point. So I think just getting in touch with desires. One of the things I noticed with a lot of women is like, they might know something is not working and they're not getting the pleasure they want, but they might not always know what they do want to be different or how to actually get that pleasure. So what do you say to those types of clients?
Yeah. So this is an exploration. I mean, sex is sort of in the zone of the play, right? It's creativity, it's exploration, it's self-discovery. I encourage them to know their own bodies first. Yep. So do you have toys? How do you experience, either in your mind or physically in your body? What do you know about your own pleasure profile? And how can you extrapolate that, or how can we share that with partner? Because if you know that information, then that gives your partner a roadmap, or how can we expand on that to include partner play?
Absolutely. I think that's a great point about like knowing your pleasure profile, and in exploring your body is a great way to do it. And I also think exploring your mind, because I think what we know is like when a moment happens, we're like, ooh, that's really doing it for me. And then, and this is true for me as well. So it just like flies out the window, It's like, oh, I don't know what I like. I just know when I like it.
We have this whole I would say, rambunctious conversation in my pleasure circle about masturbation. And it was like, okay, I asked, how many of you masturbate on your back?
Yes.
And it wasn't, the question wasn't how many of you masturbate. It was how many of you masturbate on your back, right? The built-in question was how many, it was just assuming that everyone masturbated so that nobody could opt out.
Oh, I like that.
And it was like, there was some sheepish, like, and then it was like, wait, what? There's another option? And then it was like this sheepish, like, okay, there was a few that were like, yeah, I masturbate on my stomach. And then there was like, wait, that's an option? How do you even do that? Right. So then it was like, well, can you tell us how to do that? Okay, well, so then is there anyone that's willing to describe how to do that? And then in the week between, there was a few women that tried to do it. And it was this whole thing of like, okay, what do you like about that? And how do you do that? And then could you try to do that with a toy? And then could you, and how do you enhance that? You know what I mean? And so it was this discussion of like, because logistically there's something in that. And then psychologically, what is it about that position that you really like?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think what you're saying is also the power of like being able to talk about sex openly in community and like how much can be learned when we're not just like in our own little bubble, like, oh, this is shameful and secretive and I have to hide over here with all my sexual thoughts. It's like, okay, what if you don't? What if it's actually just so normal and human? And just like you talk about the latest movie you saw, you can talk about your masturbation practices.
Yeah. And share it with peers and have it be delightful and have it be enhancing.
I love that. And I think that's so cool that you offer something like that. There's not, and that's part of why I got into this work too. There's not a lot of safe spaces to have these conversations. And certainly with the current administration and like people educating people about sex are going to be like persecuted if they're doing it in schools. But like, so we kind of need people who are doing that, in the private sector, and so I'm always just, appreciative of my listenership too.
I mean, I have friends that have always talked this way, but a lot of women, I get that feedback loop, they don't talk openly with their girlfriends about it. And guys will do locker room talk, but they don't talk about the vulnerables. They don't talk about what doesn't work at all.
Right. There's no like vulnerability in the locker room talk typically.
No, there's not like, I don't know how to do this, or I feel really awkward about this, or, and so having a place to actually unpack the stuff that doesn't work or the stuff that feels really confusing is like, who do you ask? Right.
And I think when that hit me before I became a sex therapist, I did have some clients that were just more open and vulnerable. And I was like, who else would they even talk to about this? And, I should like pursue this more. I like being the safe space for this. Yeah. So that's very cool though, that you kind of have that community for women. So that's another way people can kind of get to know their pleasure profiles is through community and through educational resources. I'm also a big fan of like, when you notice something's a turn on, like write it down, have like a little turn on journal.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you do need to communicate it with a partner, it's like, you've got your little black book of like turn ons. It's like, oh, okay, here you go.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So maybe it's just, you just write down one thing at a time. Maybe it's in the notes app of your phone. Maybe it's password protected in your Google Doc, figure out what works for you, in terms of risk level of where you're storing that. But I do think kind of making it a practice to kind of notice so that you can communicate and articulate, what's exciting for you, what's a turn on.
Yeah. I think it's so fun. It's one of those things too, where, we have so much in the way of productivity and like our lives are not just meant to be busy and productive though. This is the fun quadrant. And
I know,
right? This is the fun.
Yes.
Sumptuous, this is where the food and the creativity and the exploration lives. And I want us to feel like this matters too.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm not surprised, I guess, given the work that we do. But like, I think even before I became a sex therapist, I realized I'm like, oh, okay, so adults are really bad at rest and play, or at least adults in the US. It's like across my clients, it was like, these are some very clear themes. And I do think that, some kind of like relaxation can be a helpful prerequisite for sex for many people. And then, yeah, leaning into play, And it's like when you're playing, it doesn't all have to be perfect either.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a person who's a little type A, like myself,
Mm-hmm.
find some ways to practice that too. Like I've started doing a new practice where I just write down 10 ideas every day. And I can pick, they're different topics every day. So it might be like 10 ideas to grow my business, 10 ideas to have a hot makeout soon, 10 ideas to, like what's a bonus thing I can add for my clients, my coaching package, 10 ideas of, fun trips I could take,
I
so it's
love
just,
that.
yeah, just the idea of leaning in.
Right? It's because part of this is the juice, and
Yeah.
you just let things flow through you.
Yes.
I mean, I everything goes back to sex for me. So it's like, even if it's naughty ideas, right? That's how, like,
Yeah.
if it's a passing thought, don't squash it, right?
Right.
Just let it pass through you. Like, ooh, wouldn't that be a naughty thought? Like, you don't have to pursue everything. And just because you
No.
had a naughty thought doesing mean you're actually going to do it, right? It's a
Right.
naughty thought that came through your mind. Like, that's kind of
Yes.
fun. Just hold on to it and let it be your, like,
Yeah.
carry it around in
I
your pocket all day.
I
Let it.
agree. Well, yeah, right. Whether you're doing a practice like I'm doing or whether you're just having thoughts and allowing them, I think what happens with so many people is like, and I think especially with women because of how we're socialized, is like
Mm-hmm.
we're having the thoughts, but it's almost like we're squelching them and censoring them before they can even like be fully formed.
Yep. Judging them.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
like women will come see me like, oh, I have no desire. My partner says this is a me issue and I have to work on it or something. Or I say this is a me issue. I'm like, okay, that rarely happens in a vacuum, but okay.
Yeah.
And then they'll kind of be like, well, I did have a sexual thought. I'm like, wait, I thought you didn't have any sexual thoughts. Oh, well, I guess I did. I just didn't say it though. I'm like, I'm like, okay. So I think it goes back to the myths, right? It's like sometimes it's like there's not low libido. There's just like self-censorship.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of it too, is I say, there's deterrents and there's stimulators,
Yeah.
right? And for us, we have to address the deterrents first. Like, what are the things that are holding you down? That are
Mm-hmm.
keeping you, and the type A's are full of them. We've got lots and
Yeah.
lots of things that are keeping us very distracted and busy and,
Yeah.
obligations and that type of thing. But we got to address those first. We got to
Right.
address those. And then we've got to cultivate the other things, the good stuff, the stuff that
Yeah.
actually turns us on, the stuff that motivates us and intrigues us and that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? We've got to cultivate the stimulators. And that's,
Right.
I mean, sometimes I think we charge towards that, and
Mm-hmm.
an inexperienced therapist will do that too. Like, what turns you on, right? They go right for,
Right.
and they're like, well, what turns you on? Like, go get some chocolate and go on a date, and, date night,
Right.
and they'll just like cut to the easy solution. And that's
Yeah.
not enough, right? Just get a sitter and go on a date. It's like, yeah, but that's too, you're ignoring all the things that were the deterrents first. You've
Yes.
got to, you got to pay attention to this. You got
Yeah.
to realize that maybe she has a yeast infection, or maybe she didn't get any sleep.
Right.
Maybe she's mad, she's carrying resentment because he was a jerk the day before, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe she's worried because she hasn't had her period in too
Yeah.
many weeks, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
what are the things that are actually holding her back?
Right.
So those have to be addressed first.
Mm-hmm.
Then let's cultivate, the stimulus.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point because it's like if what's holding the person back is we're
Yeah.
not laughing together, we're not having
Mhm.
quality time, great, then go on a date night or go to a comedy show or something like that. But if what's holding her back is a yeast infection, it's like doesn't matter how many dates you go on or how hard you laugh if she's got a yeast infection,
Right.
like I think that's a really good point. And I think why, and because so many couples come to me and they're kind of like, we're good communicators, we've been to therapy, like
Yeah.
why can we not figure this out? Like, we're smart people. Why can we not figure this out on our own? We feel like we should be able to figure this out on our own.
Yeah.
And I think it's the assessment piece. And that's where people like you and I come in, where it's like we can kind of do a holistic assessment of,
Yeah.
okay, here's what's going on. Here's what's hitting the brakes. Here's kind of some things we can try. So I just encourage people to like, don't feel like you have to figure it out yourself.
Mhm.
And like you and I said, you had one class, I had zero. Even as a trained therapist, I had like zero skills to be able to navigate this myself. And, I have also been in a situation where I had a low libido in a long-term relationship. And it's like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was normal. So,
Right. And then you just feel guilty, and then you feel avoidant, and then you're just distracted.
yeah,
And then,
yeah,
it's terrible. It's a terrible little
yeah.
circular dance that you do.
Yes. So just don't torture yourself, people. It's okay to get some help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You qualify,
So,
because otherwise, if you just go to a marriage and family therapist, or you just go to a general therapist,
yeah,
they're likely to sort of take you in a circle and everyone in the room feels helpless. And
they might. And I think a lot of them are great and do refer out when they're kind of like, okay, this is like a little bit out of my depth. Like so many of my clients have an individual therapist where we're even referred by their couples counselor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's another, it's like we can then also collaborate and kind of work in conjunction with those people. But okay, so let's tell people if they're like, okay, Dr. Jenn seems to like know some good things. I need to learn more. Where can they find you? And let's tell them about your upcoming program as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So if you're in California, therapy-wise, I'm at rivieratherapy.com.
Okay.
If you're not in California, then you can find me at pleasureproject.us. So that has my podcast, that has my articles, that has the Pleasure Circle. That is my intensive that I offer. That's coming up.
Okay.
Actually, I offer that a couple times a year. It's a 6-week curriculum, and it's online, so it doesn't matter where you're located. You can just tune in. It's a 6-week, 90-minute evening women's only intensive, and that is starting on April 16th. It runs Wednesday nights. So that is capped at 8 participants. So,
and who is that for? Like, who do you feel like would really benefit the most from that?
It's for women. I mean, low desire is the main presenting issue, but it's just women who want to know more about kind of their sexual, anything we've talked about today, really, that are low desire, who want to understand, feel more comfortable with their sex and sexuality.
Okay.
Who kind of don't really understand their anatomy, don't understand their sexual, I say template. I don't know if that really makes sense to people, but, want to feel more comfortable with the language and just really tuning and kind of get a jump start on their interest in their libido. So, and also have that community, because women come in a little bit, shy and trepidatious, but really by the end, they're all laughing and
I love that.
And it's just really wonderful. And then I've got about eight of these cohorts. And so we're going to move on and become, a larger community.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Very awesome. Okay, so we will link to those websites. So it's Riviera Therapy and pleasureproject.us. We'll put those in the show notes. Okay. And then, is there anywhere else you want to send people, or those are probably the 2 best places?
That's probably the easiest. You can get to my podcast through the Pleasure Project. Yeah, it's on Spotify and Apple, but that's probably the easiest way to get there.
Okay. All right. So we'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. This was lovely. And I hope that everyone listening was able to understand a little bit more about desire, especially when it comes to women, and some of the myths were cleared up. So we will keep you all posted on future endeavors, but thanks for listening. And thank you, Dr. Jenn, for being here.
Thank you.